Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we help you take that stack of research, all the articles, spreadsheets, maybe some sticky notes, and turn it into a clear, confident plan.
And today, well, we're focusing on something pretty huge. Probably the biggest financial decision, and honestly, the most emotional one you'll likely ever make, buying a home.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're really pushing you to look beyond just that beautiful online photo. You know, the one we all get drawn in by the perfect kitchen or those high ceilings.
Oh yeah, happens every time.
But we're asking, what's actually going on outside the front door?
Exactly. We're moving past the simple curb appeal today. We're diving headfirst into something that's often neglected, but it's absolutely critical due diligence. We're investigating the neighborhood itself.
The community.
The community, the overall, vibe of the place. You really need to understand let's say, the structural integrity of the whole ecosystem, not just the house's shiny Instagram profile.
Right. So our mission for you, the listener, is basically to become a neighborhood detective.
Ah, I like that.
We're pulling together some complex stuff here. Everything from, like, deep urban theory, some forgotten regulatory history, to cutting-edge prop tech tools and actual, boots-on-the-ground intelligence gathering.
Okay.
The goal is a step-by-step guide. How do you uncover the real story of a place? The story that actually predicts, well, is it going to be stable for the next decade, or is it facing some volatility?
And just to be clear, we're not just going to talk about house styles, right? Even though that stuff is fascinating.
It is interesting, yeah.
We could spend ages on, like, the Flemish gables in early Virginia or that whole Italian villa-style Andrew Jackson Downing push.
And the picturesque thing.
Or the neoclassical revival after 1895. But those styles, they're really just symptoms, aren't they? Symptoms of taste, money, trends.
Exactly. Surface level.
We're diving deeper into the historical forces, the political ones, the financial drivers that actually shape the whole area. And crucially, the hard data that might predict its financial future.
Okay, so to really get why a neighborhood works the way it does, or maybe why it doesn't work the way you'd expect, you first have to recognize the heavy hand of zoning and public policy.
Right. It's not all just organic growth, is it?
Rarely. I mean, the structure of most neighborhoods, it's largely fixed by regulations, often regulations that were put in place decades before the current residents even showed up.
And our sources really stress that this is a huge deal in the United States specifically. Zoning plays this uniquely central role here because other tools governments might use, like big public building programs or really comprehensive planning departments that guide growth, things that are more common in Western Europe, they're just comparatively weaker here.
Yeah, that's a key difference.
So in the U.S., zoning becomes the main way the government controls how private land gets used. It's the dominant engine for, building cities or sometimes keeping them stuck.
That really is the core issue. When zoning first came about, early 20th century, the official line was public safety, health, general welfare. That was the justification.
Sure. Sounds reasonable.
But almost right away, those rules led to really uniform, really strictly segmented outcomes. The classic example, single-family zoning, is just everywhere in U.S. cities.
Okay, let's break that down. Single-family zoning, what does that actually mean? What does it exclude?
Well, it's targeting a very specific, maybe even idealized kind of family, right? And by law, it kicks out almost everything else. Apartment buildings, townhouses, duplexes, any multifamily housing. Forget about most commercial activity.
So no corner store, no little cafe.
Generally, no. It pretty much only allows that single-family house, maybe some basic extras like a detached garage or a pool, and sometimes, a civic building like a church or a school might be permitted.
Wow. Think about how rigid that is, how much that locks things in place.
It's huge. In lots of metro areas, a massive chunk of the land is legally restricted to just this one activity, people living in detached houses. Now flip that. Try to find land that allows a real mix, residential and commercial.
Like living above a shop.
Yeah, or next to a small office. That kind of flexible, mixed-use setup, the percentage of land zoned for that kind of thing is usually tiny, like low single digits.
And that legal suppression, that lack of mixed use, that must fundamentally limit things like walkability.
Absolutely. Walkability, diversity of businesses, even the long-term financial stability of the community. It all gets impacted.
It's wild how decisions made like 100 years ago by bureaucrats are still dictating today's real estate market. But we also have to face the darker side of this history, right? How government policies actively shaped who lived where.
We do.
You mentioned property values, stability. That stability was often, explicitly based on race.
Yes, absolutely. We have to talk about the Federal Housing Administration,
No.
the FHA.
Okay.
Our sources go into detail here. From the moment it was created back in the 1930s, the FHA adopted a racial policy. It was focused on protecting what they actually called the all-white neighborhood.
Wow, they actually use that term.
They did, and they weren't passive about it. FHA agents actively worked to keep minorities out of white areas. This wasn't just, social attitudes. This was de jure segregation. Segregation mandated by federal law.
Primarily through redlining, right? Denying mortgages.
Primarily through redlining, yeah. Denying federally backed mortgages in minority neighborhoods or even integrated ones. Labeling them as too risky, essentially coding them as undesirable because of race.
I think a lot of people have heard of redlining, maybe think of it as just a bad thing that happened. But the real impact, the lasting economic consequences, that's what matters for someone buying a home now.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
By systematically choking off the housing supply available to African Americans, forcing them into smaller, often older, deteriorating areas.
Yeah.
Well, it basically gave property owners in those designated black neighborhoods a license to charge exorbitant prices, make huge profits.
Because there's nowhere else for people to go.
Precisely. The economic data is pretty shocking. Studies showed landlords could charge black families up to 20% more in rent for similar places compared to white tenants in the open market.
20% more for the same thing.
Sometimes even more.
Huh.
We're talking serious exploitation driven purely by this artificially created scarcity. One source mentions a tragic story from Chicago in 1947. A white tenant paying $15 a month gets evicted.
Okay.
Why? So the landlord could immediately turn around and charge a black family $60 for the exact same apartment.
$60 from 15. That's horrifying.
It is. And that disparity, that systemic denial of the chance to build wealth through homeownership, that's a huge part of the forgotten history behind the generational wealth gap we still grapple with today.
And this whole geographical sorting, this segregation, it only got supercharged by the rise of the car, right?
Oh, completely. The automobile drove what urban theorists call the flight from density. People started leaving the dense city centers. It accelerated this massive trek out to the suburbs.
Emptying out the downtowns.
Yeah, and the car didn't just let people commute further. It fundamentally reshaped how cities were even designed. It fueled the rise of the edge city.
Right, the suburban office parks, huge malls.
Exactly. Big parking lots everywhere. These places started replicating the functions of the city center, but way out on the fringe. And this outward sprawl, especially in cities that basically grew up with a car, like LA or Miami.
Post-industrial cities.
Right. Really determined where different social classes ended up living, separated often by both race and income. So if you're researching a neighborhood now, you have to ask, was this place built before the car took over or after? The answer tells you a lot about its fundamental DNA.
Okay, so that history gives us the regulatory bones, the demographic skeleton of the city. But how do we assess the living tissue, the neighborhood as it is today? For this, I think we absolutely have to bring in the great urbanist Jane Jacobs. Her ideas about evaluating an area not just as a place, but as a, quote, living, complex organism.
Yes, Jacobs is essential here. She spent her life just watching cities, figuring out how they actually worked on the ground.
Yeah.
And she believed a successful district, a healthy one, needs 4 specific conditions to generate diversity and, importantly, stability.
Okay, what's condition number 1?
Mixed primary uses. That's the first key. It means the district needs its own character, its own specialties. It has to draw people in from outside for specific reasons. That's crucial for economic variety in a city.
So it can't just be self-contained.
Right. And just as important, its own people, the residents, they also need to go out and engage with the wider city. There needs to be that flow in and out.
Okay, so if a neighborhood is just, say, single-family homes and maybe an elementary school serving only itself, it's probably going to be kind of boring and economically fragile.
Potentially, yes. Jacobs would argue it lacks resilience.
Yeah.
And conversely, if it only serves outsiders, maybe it's purely an entertainment district that's dead after 5 p.m., well, that's not a real community either. Success lies in that intricate cross-use.
People living there, working there, visiting there.
Exactly. And the efficiency of it all depends on what Jacobs called secondary diversity. That's the stuff that grows up around the primary, uses the dry cleaners, the little shops, the restaurants.
So supporting businesses.
Right. These secondary enterprises are only really efficient and stable if they serve mixed primary uses. In plain English, you want the coffee shop to be busy with residents in the morning, office workers at lunch, and maybe people visiting the park in the afternoon.
Okay. So if it only serves one group, like only the office workers, it's vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. If the main employer leaves or people's habits change, those secondary businesses can just die off. That area becomes unstable.
And this leads right into Jacob's famous dead barrier warning, which seems like a really valuable lesson if you're looking at a place with, say, a commercial strip nearby.
It's a great warning. She used this example in Philadelphia, Chestnut and Broad Streets. It used to be this vibrant hub of different kinds of shopping. A real 100% location, she called it.
Okay, peak activity.
Peak activity, lots of variety.
Hmm.
But then, 3 banks bought up 3 of the 4 corners of the main intersection.
Just banks.
Just banks. This concentration of one single function banking, it destroyed the essential diversity of that spot. From that point on, Jacobs argued that intersections stopped being a valuable mixed-use area and it became a dead barrier.
Because banks don't really generate street life after hours or on weekends.
Exactly. They're a monoculture. They have limited hours, limited appeal. So you need to look for signs of this. If you see too much uniformity, like too many chain drugstores in a row, too many identical fast food drive-thrus, maybe a cluster of bland municipal buildings, that could be a warning sign, potential dead barrier forming.
So when you're actually out there walking the neighborhood, which is phase 2 of our detective work, right?
The essential part.
You need to be looking for real street life activity, day and night. Are people actually moving around for different reasons?
That day and night pulse is the lifeblood. There's a great anecdote one source uses about Armitage Avenue in Chicago in the Sheffield neighborhood. Residents there described it as having so much varied activity, it almost feels like a movie.
Ha! Okay, that's a good sign.
That's a great sign. It means people are living there, working nearby, eating there, walking through at all different hours. If the streets are basically deserted after 6 p.m., then according to Jacob's metrics, that vibrancy is missing or failing.
We should also touch on density and social interaction. People often just think density means high rises, but it's more complex than that.
It is. Lower density, like in many suburbs, often leads to more local self-containment. You tend to know your immediate neighbors, maybe the people on your block.
Right, block parties, that kind of thing.
Maybe. But in cities, once you get to densities around, say, 20 dwellings per acre or higher, something shifts.
Yeah.
You often find that people living right near each other are strangers. And they might always be strangers. The scale changes the dynamic.
So understanding the density level helps set your expectations. Are you buying into a place where everyone knows each other, or more of an anonymous, maybe more efficient commuting zone?
Exactly. Both can be fine, depending on what you want. But you need to know what kind of social fabric you're potentially joining.
And let's look closely at the type of commerce. This feels like a huge clue about where the neighborhood is heading socioeconomically.
It really is.
Yeah.
Especially in areas that might be gentrifying, whether quickly or subtly. You might hear newcomers complain about, quote, the absence of retail shopping opportunities.
Okay.
But you have to check that against what's actually there.
What do you mean?
Well, they might be complaining because there aren't any, $15 artisanal sandwich shops or high-end boutiques selling fancy homewares. The so-called wine and cheese shops haven't arrived yet.
Got it. They mean their kind of retail isn't there.
Precisely. But if you walk down a street like Knickerbocker Avenue in Bushwick, as one source highlights, you often find incredible vibrancy. Tons of places to buy essential local goods, shoes, affordable jewelry, fresh produce, cheap and delicious tamales and tortas.
Stuff the current residents need and use.
Exactly. So the supposed lack of retail often just means the new, expensive commerce desired by newcomers hasn't displaced the existing businesses yet. The current commerce is actually serving the existing population very well. You have to distinguish, is it true retail desert or just a retail mix that doesn't match a specific taste profile?
That's a really important distinction. Okay. Beyond the function in the shops, what about just quick visual cues, things you can spot quickly for immediate signs of care or stability?
Yeah, the first one's pretty simple. Just perceived pride of ownership. Do the houses look maintained? Or are there obvious signs of neglect? Peeling paint, broken fences, overgrown yards? Are owners consistently reinvesting in their properties?
This is basically curb appeal, right? What investors look for.
It is. Professional investors track this because it's a key indicator of how a property, and by extension the area, is likely to perform long-term. It reflects management quality, community stability, resident investment.
And look lower, too, right? Like at the actual street level.
Yes. Look at the immediate public environment. Is trash picked up reliably, or are bins overflowing? Are the trash enclosures and recycling bins neat and well-maintained, Or are they broken down and spilling onto the sidewalk?
Little details, but they say a lot.
They say a huge amount about whether the community cares and, crucially, whether the local government is doing its job effectively. If the city can't even manage basic sanitation like keeping sidewalks clean, what does that suggest about funding for bigger infrastructure needs down the line?
All right, let's pivot from the theory and the observation to a practical checklist. We're moving into phase one, the digital recon, using tech to vet the market before you spend time and gas money driving around.
Yes. And you should start with prop tech, property technology, for market vetting. This is really essential for modern due diligence. It's way beyond just looking at Zillow estimates.
Okay, prop tech. So these are tools using big data AI. What specifically should you be looking for? Is it just crime maps and school ratings?
Those are part of it, but the real power is deeper. You're looking for leading indicators, things that predict change. For instance, some sophisticated prop tech platforms can give you things like gentrification scores.
How do they measure that?
It might be based on shifts in consumer spending data in the area, changes in utility usage patterns, permit applications, things like that. They can also show pedestrian traffic heat maps, maybe using anonymized cell phone data to show you the difference between daytime office crowds and nighttime residents.
Ah, okay, that's useful.
Harry. They might also analyze local regulatory risks, like is there talk of changing school district boundaries, are there long-term infrastructure projects planned, or maybe unfunded liabilities. These tools give you insights into market volatility that you just can't get otherwise. Helps with risk assessment.
That's definitely a step up from basic online searches. And what about for new construction, places that aren't even built yet?
Oh, absolutely. If you're considering buying something off-plan or in a new development, using virtual visualization tools is pretty much non-negotiable now.
Like VR walkthroughs.
Exactly. VR or 3D fly-throughs and walkthroughs, they let you experience the virtual streets, see the property as if you were actually there. And crucially, they help address specific concerns, like what will the sun exposure be like at 4 p.m. in December?
Good point.
Or what's the actual view going to be from that third-floor balcony once the building next door goes up? This tech helps secure commitments by reducing that uncertainty about the finished environment.
Okay, next up. Macro market indicators. Finding the path of growth. This phrase gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
But what are the specific actionable things that define this path? How do you spot it?
You need to look beyond just simple population numbers growing. You want indicators of high-quality growth. Things like major companies announcing relocations to the area, big public infrastructure investments, new transit lines, university research expansions, significant zoning changes that signal future density is planned or approved.
So, signs of investment and future activity.
Right. When you buy, ideally, you want the neighborhood to be already in that path of growth. You want those tailwinds helping your investment, not headwinds holding it back.
And tied closely to that, especially if you're thinking of renting it out or just gauging demand, is looking hard at vacancy rates.
Yes. Critical step. You need to compare the current vacancy rate to the long-term average for that specific area, maybe over the last 3 to 5 years.
Why the comparison?
Because it's a reality check.
Hmm.
Let's say a seller, or maybe a developer, gives you a pro forma, their financial projection, and they're assuming a really low vacancy, like 3%.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds great. But if you check reliable third-party data, say from CBRE or the National Multifamily Housing Council, and you find the actual historical average vacancy for that submarket is closer to 10%.
Ah, then their numbers are too optimistic.
Almost certainly. They're likely underestimating vacancy to make projected returns look better. You must base your own financial modeling on conservative assumptions, ideally using those external forecasts. Be prepared for the market to fluctuate.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's the digital work. Now, phase two, on-the-ground intelligence, hitting the pavement. You said this is essential.
Cannot skip this. This is where the real detective work happens. Walking around, talking to people. You need to figure out the neighborhood's current trajectory. Is it actively getting better, or is it starting to decline?
And you mentioned needing to be a bit skeptical when talking to people, right? Like, if someone says it's stable.
Yeah, you have to read between the lines sometimes. If a neighbor, or maybe even an agent, describes the area as just stable, especially in a dynamic city, you might reasonably interpret that as code for stagnating or possibly even declining.
Because stability might mean it's falling behind relative to other areas nearby.
Exactly. In real estate, standing still often means losing ground in relative value. Look for concrete evidence of the area's momentum or lack thereof.
And one piece of physical evidence is the number of for sale signs.
Keep an eye out for that. The for sale sign index, let's call it. If you suddenly see a lot of signs clustered together more than you'd expect for the time of year, it can be an indicator of instability, maybe financial distress among homeowners, or a general feeling that it's time to get out.
But couldn't a lot of signs just mean there's a lot of new houses being built and sold?
That's the crucial distinction you need to make. If it's a row of brand new, identical townhouses with signs from the same developer, that's just high supply hitting the market. That's different.
Hmm.
But if you see, say, a dozen different for sale signs in front of older houses, different styles, different agents, that's more likely a signal that existing longtime residents might be leaving en masse. Maybe a big local employer shut down, or people are worried about property values. Context is everything.
Got it. Now, here's a technique that sounds really effective, maybe a bit bold, that investors use actually talking to the neighbor.
Yes, and it's invaluable, whether you're buying a rental property or your own home.
How does it work?
Professional investors, when they buy a property, they make a point to introduce themselves to the immediate neighbors right away, give them their name, their phone number, and they proactively say, hey, if my tenant ever causes any issues, please call me directly.
Ah, setting expectations and opening communication.
Exactly. And as a potential home buyer, you can do the same thing, essentially. Introduce yourself. Say you're considering buying the house down the street. Ask open-ended questions.
Like,
Things like, what's this street usually like on a Saturday night? Or how have you seen the local schools change over the last few years? Or what's the biggest challenge you find living right here?
you're not just fishing for compliments.
No. You want real, nuanced feedback. Does it sound stable? Are there underlying tensions? You're gathering intelligence and also kind of vetting the community you might be joining.
Okay, makes sense. And finally, for the on-the-ground phase, the reality check, the commute.
Yeah, got to do it. Our sources really stress this historical link between how easy it is to get to work and how viable a neighborhood is long-term. Tech gives us map estimates, but
You've had to actually tried it.
you have to physically test the connectivity. How long does it really take you to get to work during peak rush hour? Or to get to the grocery store, the doctor, whatever's important to you? Be realistic. Check for traffic bottlenecks that don't show up on a map or during a quiet Sunday afternoon visit. Your daily quality of life depends heavily on this.
So true. Okay, phase 3, the paperwork. The legal and document deep dive, maybe the least glamorous part.
Definitely not glamorous, but potentially the most costly if you mess it up.
Right, what needs checking?
If you're buying any property, whether it was a rental before or not, you need to inspect the official documents. Don't just take the seller's word for it. For example, they might claim the annual property tax bill is only $1,500.
Okay.
Or they might say the upstairs unit rents for $675 a month. You need to verify that stuff. Look at the actual tax bills from the county. Look for copies of current leases or rental listings to confirm the advertised rents. Make sure you're actually buying what you think you're buying.
And the tax bill detail is really important, you mentioned, because taxes often jump right after a sale.
Very common. Because the local assessor's office often uses the new higher sale price as the basis for reassessing the property's value for tax purposes.
So the previous owner's low tax bill isn't necessarily what you'll pay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A house that was assessed at, say, $200,000 for years might suddenly get reassessed at the $300,000 you just paid for it. That can trigger a big tax increase you weren't expecting. You should try to get copies of past tax assessments and maybe even call the assessor's office to understand how reassessments work post-sale in that area. Estimate that potential jump.
Good advice. And for anyone looking at a multi-unit property, or even just wanting peace of mind about who's living nearby, there's the issue of vetting people.
Yeah, this is basic risk mitigation, especially for landlords. If you're buying a rental property, you absolutely must have a strict, consistent screening process for every new adult resident who moves in. That includes partners, roommates, long-term guests who weren't on the original lease. Because if you don't vet and screen every adult living there, you honestly have no idea who is occupying your property. The risk goes way up risk of property damage, illegal activity, unauthorized occupants, maybe even unknowingly renting to someone dangerous. The small cost of a thorough background check is nothing compared to the potential cost of dealing with one really bad tenant situation.
Okay, so we've built up this huge pile of evidence, from understanding the historical zoning patterns to analyzing the current street life, using prop tech data, doing the on-the-ground detective work. Now, how do we tie all this neighborhood research directly back to financial outcomes, to feeling confident in the decision?
Right, because community instability isn't just a feeling. it has real, measurable economic consequences.
Oh.
The research really confirms this link, especially for more vulnerable people. Studies show that if someone experiences a forced move like an eviction or displacement compared to choosing to move voluntarily, well, that forced move is associated with a significant jump in the poverty rate and the crime rate of the neighborhood they end up in.
Wow. So instability itself creates more risk and disadvantage.
It absolutely does. You can reinforce these cycles of poverty and risk. It's profoundly costly for the families affected.
And we even see the economic reality of crime reflected in surprisingly small rent differences sometimes.
Yeah, look at the data from that Milwaukee study mentioned in the sources. Researchers compared rents in the most dangerous neighborhoods, say the top 25% for violent crime versus the least dangerous, the bottom 25%.
Okay. What was the difference?
The median rent difference was only $25 a month, like $575 versus $600.
Only $25 difference between the safest and most dangerous areas.
Astonishingly small, right?
Yeah.
It just highlights how little financial buffer or choice vulnerable populations often have. They might be forced into higher risk areas simply because they can't afford that small premium for a significantly safer environment elsewhere. So your neighborhood research, it's not just about your own comfort zone. It's also about understanding these harsh economic forces that shape communities.
That really puts it in perspective. Okay, moving towards the final financial steps. We talked about taxes. We also need to factor in other long-term costs, right? Like insurance.
Yes, insurance often gets overlooked in the excitement, but it's absolutely non-negotiable and can vary hugely based on location and the house itself.
So call an agent early.
Definitely. Contact a local insurance agent early in your process. Get a realistic estimate for insuring the specific type of house, its construction materials, its age in that specific location. And crucially, ask about regional risks that might need separate policies or come with really high deductibles.
Well, it's floods, earthquakes.
Exactly. Flood zones, areas prone to wildfires, earthquake risk. These things can dramatically increase your annual insurance costs, impacting your monthly cash flow and the overall affordability of owning that home.
And beyond the annual costs like taxes and insurance, this neighborhood deep dive should also inform how much you set aside for future repairs, right?
Yeah.
For CapEx.
Yes, capital expenditures. This is where thorough neighborhood investigation can really pay off or prevent disaster. If your on-the-ground research or maybe checking city records reveals the area has aging infrastructure.
Like old sewer lines, roads needing repair.
Yeah, or maybe inadequate storm drainage that causes local flooding. If you uncover risks like that, you need to factor in the possibility of future special assessments. The city, or maybe the homeowners association, might levy extra fees on property owners to pay for those big upgrades.
Ouch, unexpected bills.
Exactly. So if you identify that kind of risk, you need a budget for larger CapEx reserves right from the start. It might mean you can't stretch quite as far on the purchase price, even if the lender approved a higher loan. It prevents you from becoming over-leveraged later.
Which brings us back to the big picture goal, connecting the quality of the neighborhood long-term to your investment value and your financial well-being.
Right. Owning a home, it secures the one asset that probably determines your lifestyle more than anything else. Our sources really hammer this point. You have to buy based on your actual long-term needs first. That includes needing a stable, functional neighborhood with decent infrastructure. Don't just buy based on the maximum amount a lender says you can borrow.
Avoid becoming house rich and income poor.
Exactly. Especially if you get hit with unexpected neighborhood-wide costs down the road.
So ultimately, all this work, this detective work, it's about building confidence.
That's the goal. By doing this really thorough, deep research, you move beyond just buying a building. You gain the confidence that the community you're choosing actually aligns with your long-term goals, your lifestyle needs, and importantly, your tolerance for risk.
And while a good real estate agent is helpful,
Very helpful, yes. They can provide really important comps, comparative values of similar properties over time. That's valuable context.
but the agent isn't doing this level of deep dive usually.
No. The critical thinking, the detailed investigation, pulling together the history, the current vibe, the future projections, that synthesis is fundamentally your job as the buyer.
Okay, so we started by saying look beyond the polished photo. And we've ended up with hopefully a pretty complete toolkit for doing just that. We've covered how to evaluate a neighborhood by its historical context, those often invisible zoning rules, sometimes with biased origins.
It's functional design applying Jane Jacobs tests for vibrancy and diversity.
It's real-world community indicators, the actual detective work of checking signs, talking to neighbors.
And its macroeconomic trajectory analyzing that path of growth data.
The outcome should be confidence. Confidence that you're choosing not just the right house structure, but the right community, minimizing your financial risk, maximizing your potential for long-term wealth, and just quality of life.
Well said.
So here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to think about. How will the current reality of government regulation, which, as we discussed, has historically favored the detached single-family home model and actively suppressed mixing commercial and residential uses for decades, how will that legacy impact the long-term vibrancy and financial health of that neighborhood you're researching right now, maybe 20 years down the line? Will that area manage to adapt and stay on a path of growth? Or could it become a piece of the urban fabric that's actually weakened, maybe even destined to be hollowed out, by the very regulations originally meant to stabilize or protect it?
That is definitely food for thought.
Oh,
Something to consider for the long haul.
indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Our pleasure.
We'll see you next time.